And welcome to the Cedar Falls regular City Council meeting this October 1st, 2018. I now call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk, please.
Miller?
Here.
DeBoer?
Here.
Cruz?
Here.
Blanford?
Here.
Dara?
Here.
Wieland?
Here.
Green?
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item C, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting September 17th?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. I do have three proclamations to read this evening. The first one is the Earth Science Week proclamation, October 7th through the 13th, 2018. It reads, whereas the earth sciences are fundamental to society, and whereas the earth sciences provide the research to mine wind and solar energy as alternative power sources, and whereas the earth sciences provide methods to access water resources from the subsurface and surface for life support, and whereas the earth sciences provide information to develop and utilize aggregate resources and metallic ores to build society, and whereas the earth sciences provide research to mine and develop energy resources to power society, and whereas the earth sciences provide fundamental research in agriculture to build good soils to provide food sources to feed the world's populations, and whereas the earth sciences are crucial for assisting citizens and governments in best management practices for understanding, mining, and developing our resources. Therefore, we proclaim the second week in October as Earth Science Week, signed this first day of October 2018. I believe Sherman, a regular guest, is here to speak with a couple others. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Evan Eads with the Earth Science Department, University of Northern Iowa.
Hello, Council. Like I said, my name's Evan with the Earth and Environmental Science Department of the University of Northern Iowa. This is my senior year, so it's been a great 4 years in Cedar Falls. Thank you very much. So the Environmental Science Department, we cover everything from clean energy, sustainable water sources, air quality, aggregates, geology. The most important thing, though, is the Earth and Environmental Science Department works for resource sustainability and regional sustainability. This is vastly important in Iowa as our major product is agriculture. So soil development is extremely important. We've been working very hard with conservation projects with the biology department on the Tallgrass Prairie. We have been working with stream restoration projects along with that. Dry Run Creek, Miller Creek, recently the Cedar River project, going over the proposed Whitewater project in downtown Cedar Falls. But the main thing to take away from looking at the Earth and Environmental Science Department is that we're here to help the community realize its potential for sustainability and moving forward in an ever-changing world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Council members, staff, guests, and the public, on behalf of the Earth Science Week Committee, we thank you for issuing the Earth Science Week proclamation. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the issuance of the proclamation, along with the Sunday at the Quarry program. This year's theme, Everyone is a Miner, is an effort to call attention to the need to utilize, manage, and conserve all of our resources. From metals to non-metals, from soil to water, from wind and other energy sources, we derive everything we need to survive by mining our resources. In fact, our bodies even mine the air we breathe for oxygen, and our bodies mine the food we eat for nutrients to maintain life systems. We are all miners, all of us. In both the private and public sectors, we must understand and implement best management practices to utilize our resources, with all areas of government leading the way and setting the example. We hope to see you October the 7th at BMC's Raymond Quarry for Sunday at the Quarry program. The USGS will be there, the Iowa Geological Survey, the Flood Center. In fact, Cedar Falls Utilities, among the others, will be presenting programs for the public, lots of activities, and lots of information. Thank you so very much for the proclamation, and let's have a great Earth Science Week and the rest of the year as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate hearing from both of you. The second proclamation is a proclamation for Mental Illness Awareness Week 2018. It reads, whereas mental health is part of overall health, and whereas 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness in a given year, and whereas approximately half of chronic mental illness begins by age 14 and 3/4 by age 24, and whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the 2nd leading cause among young adults, and 90% of people who die by suicide have an underlying mental illness. And whereas long delays, sometimes decades, often occur between the time symptoms first appear and when individuals get help. And whereas early identification and treatment can make a difference in successful management of mental illness and recovery, and whereas it is important to maintain mental health and learn the symptoms of mental illness in order to get help when it's needed. And whereas every citizen and community can make a difference in helping end the silence and stigma that for too long has surrounded mental illness and discouraged people from getting help. Whereas public education and civic activities can encourage mental health and help improve the lives of individuals and families affected by illness. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Jim Brown, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim October 7th through the 13th as Mental Illness Awareness Week in Cedar Falls to shine a light on mental illness and fight stigma, provide support, educate the public, and advocate for equal care. Signed this first day of October 2018. I believe Ms. Hartsfield is here to say a few words. Welcome.
Mayor Brown and council members, I'm here as a representative of the NAMI, Black Hawk County Mental Health. I appreciate your presenting this proclamation for Mental Illness Awareness Week. NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. Black Hawk County is a nonprofit mental health agency. It was started by families affected by mental illness, determined to fight stigma and to create a system of recovery for people living with mental illness. Our agency offers free classes, educational programs, presentations, and support groups to help people with mental illness and families, partners, and friends. This year's theme focuses on curing stigma because stigma means people who deal with this disease do not receive the help and support they need. On Wednesday, October 10th, we will host a screening of Resilience, a documentary about the science of adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. The film covers solutions to problems caused by trauma and how to treat and prevent toxic stress. It will be at the boardroom of Education Service Center in Waterloo, 1516 Washington Street. When anyone's interested in a handout out, I do have some available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The third proclamation is
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, I've been involved with the National Alliance on Mental Illness for over 20 years. And each time I come here and I say, mental illness is an illness, and it's curable, it's treatable, it's not curable. But you can get an exceeding amount of help from National Alliance on Mental Illness because it's confidential, it's with people who are trained to help you, and it gives you new inputs and new information on what's going through your mind. And the model I use is if you keep thinking what you thought, you keep getting what you got. If you start going to get help from NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, you get new thoughts to put in with your old thoughts, and it does work. The tragedy of it is it takes so long to get people to realize they need help. The joy of it, and I've seen it many times, is people after 3 or 4 years come to NAMI, and all of a sudden their parents start understanding, the person starts understanding. They find out there are treatments for it, and they have somebody to talk to. It's all confidential. It doesn't get out of the room. So if you're wondering if you should go, give it a try. It's a good start on increasing the thoughts that you have on illness. So I appreciate what NAMI does, and I thank you for coming.
Thank you, Councilman. Well said. The next proclamation is Breast Cancer Awareness Month proclamation. It reads, whereas breast cancer is the most frequently diagnosed cancer in women, and whereas 2,400 new breast cancers are estimated to be diagnosed in Iowa women in 2018, and whereas we don't know how to prevent breast cancer from occurring, and whereas observing October as Breast Cancer Awareness Month provides a special opportunity to offer education to our community on the importance of making evidence-based decisions in regards to our health. And whereas as a community, we can 1, create policies that support healthy living, 2, make the healthy choice the easy choice. And 3, encourage women to access screening at an age determined by a woman and her provider, all to help reduce breast cancer incidences and death. And whereas I call upon the people of Cedar Falls to observe Breast Cancer Awareness Month by learning about your environment, healthy lifestyle choices, encouraging a woman you know to access screening, whether through medical coverage or programs available in our community, and showing support towards fellow residents impacted by breast cancer diagnosis. Now therefore, be it resolved, I, Jim Brown, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in Cedar Falls, signed this first day of October 2018. I believe we have Mr. Witt here to have a few words. And if I could, I got a couple of the police chiefs here to be our Vanna Whites and show off a little bit of what we have going on.
Yep. Hi, thank you. Thank you for your support and for the proclamation today. I'm a member of the Beyond Pink team. We are an all-volunteer group, and we're celebrating 30 years in our community. TEAM is an acronym for we take action, we educate, we advocate, and we make a difference. The patches these guys are wearing are a fundraiser that Craig contacted me about. We're super excited about it. We're excited to have the support of the city. And all of that money goes right back into our community. We use that money to give grants specifically to women and men who've been diagnosed with breast cancer. We gave over $66,000 last year to 78 individuals. We have a pink ribbon run this weekend where we hope to raise hopefully close to that amount because we'll put that right back into the community. We do a quarterly newsletter, a quarterly and monthly support group, and we send breast cancer advocates to Washington, D.C. to make sure that breast cancer remains a legislative and research priority. So again, we really thank the city. They've been everywhere. They do some community events. They're going to be at the Pink Ribbon Run. You can also buy the patches here at City Hall. I think it'll be hard not to see a pink patch this month. And they also have the pink police car that'll be around town. So we really appreciate the support of the city of Cedar Falls.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Chiefs. Moving on our agenda, is there any revisions, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item E is a special order of business. E1 is a public hearing on a proposed ordinance granting a partial property tax exemption for construction of a warehouse addition at Savannah Park Drive. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any communications filed with the city clerk?
I have no written communications on file.
Thank you. Before we move to oral comments in the public sector here, I'll have Shane Graham, one of our staff, give us an update on this public hearing.
Thanks, Mayor. What we have here is back in September 2017, City Council approved a development agreement with Standard Distribution Company at 317 Savannah Park Road to build a 53,000 square foot warehouse addition onto their existing building. One of the other items with that agreement included donating a piece of land across the street from their building for a parking lot for their trailer storage. They've built the addition, the 53,000 square foot addition. It's got a buildable taxable value of $1.8 million. And generally what we do with these types of agreements is City Council will then, once construction starts or is completed, Council will approve the tax abatement, which allows the business to apply for a 5-year tax abatement through Black Hawk County. And so what this is, what Council will be acting on is just the approval of the tax abatement to file with Black Hawk County for that addition.
Thank you, Shane. I will now open up for public comments on this public hearing. Do I see any? Hearing and seeing none, declare the hearing closed. Item 2 is pass an ordinance granting a partial property tax exemption for construction of a warehouse addition at Savannah Park Drive. Upon its first consideration, is there a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. Open it for council. Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 3 is a public hearing and proposed agreement for private development and conveyance of certain city-owned real estate. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any communications filed with the city clerk?
I have received no written communications, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Once again, before the public, I think, Shane, you're up again to give us some information here.
Thanks, Mayor. What we have here is, before City Council tonight, is an agreement for development for an 18,000 square foot office building. Jim Mudd Jr. with 6 Kids LLC is proposing to build this office building on behalf of Raybo Agri-Finance. The location of this project is on Technology Parkway, east of Hudson Road, just to the west of an existing multi-tenant office that Mr. Mudd just built several years ago. The lot itself is just over 3 acres in size, 2.2 acres being buildable minus the setbacks, and the building will have a minimum valuation of $2.5 million. So per that, the city's policies, this does meet the intent for the donation of the land, and then also this will include a 5-year tax rebate program. Similar to the tax abatement that we do for industrial projects, but because this is an office project, it would involve tax rebates instead of tax abatements. With this agreement, we are asking council to approve the development agreement and also approve deeding of the land to 6 kids so they can start this project.
Thank you, Shane. Now open it up for public oral comments. Hearing and seeing none, declare the hearing closed. And item 4 is resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement for private development and a minimum assessment agreement and approving and authorizing execution of a quick claim deed conveying title to certain real estate. Is there a motion, please?
Second.
Motion second. Open it up for council. Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 5 is a public hearing on the proposed rezoning of property located in the southwest corner of Highway 58 and West Ridgeway Avenue, subject to certain conditions. Motion to receive and file proof of publication.
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any communications filed to the city clerk?
I received no written communications, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. Again, before the public, Shane, you're up again.
Thank you. What we have here is a request to rezone approximately 49 acres from A1 Agricultural District to Highway 1 Commercial District. I do have several slides here that I will be showing just so we can get a sense of where this property is at. You can see this property is at the southwest corner of West Ridgeway Avenue and Highway 58. And again, it's currently in agricultural production. The rezoning to Highway 1 would allow it to be used for commercial development. The developer is proposing a retail development on this site. When looking at rezonings, we look at several criteria. One being, is this in conformance with the comprehensive plan? I know the screen looks a little odd up there, but I'll explain it. The future land use map does show this entire parcel as commercial corridor. Again, it's located along Highway 20 to the south, Highway 58 to the east, and West Ridgeway Avenue on the north. So it is in a large traffic corridor, and our future land use map does show it as commercial. So this is in conformance with the rezoning to Highway 1 with the comprehensive plan, which shows it as commercial. Location of services such as sanitary, sewer, water main. If you look on this map, this is showing where the nearest utilities are. There is a sanitary sewer main that runs along the north side of this property. So the developer will be able to just extend the sewer that's already at the site to serve this development. And there is a water main on the north side of West Ridgeway Avenue. Again, that can just be tapped south underneath the road to be brought to this property for development again. So it would appear that all utilities are available to this site for development. One of the other things that we look at is access, both for vehicles and pedestrian access. Right now, by rezoning it from agricultural to commercial, we are anticipating a large increase or a significant increase in the traffic, as right now there really is no traffic to that site being agricultural, and rezoning it to commercial will increase that traffic. So one of the things that staff has been working with the developer on was to prepare a traffic impact study. So the applicant did prepare a traffic impact study which will look at the existing conditions and the proposed conditions at full build-out, what impacts the development will have on the existing roadways such as Highway 58 and West Ridgeway Avenue. Again, that will look at the rezoning of that, what kind of traffic improvements are needed. And so they are they have the traffic study. They just got it to us today. It'll take us about a week or so to review the traffic study. We did hire a third-party consultant to do a review as well as staff, so city staff and the third-party consultant will review the contents of the traffic study. And on this slide, what you can see is they are proposing two different accesses, one across from Nordic Drive, that's the middle circle, and then one on the left there, they're proposing whether it be a full access, that'll be their main access, whether that's a roundabout or a signalized intersection. Those are things that the traffic study are going to help determine what recommendations for their accesses be. And then also the traffic impact study will look at what intersection improvements may be needed at Highway 58 and West Ridgeway Avenue. So this traffic study is looking at that entire area to see what impacts this will have. So at this time, like I said, we just got the traffic study today, but in order to keep this project moving forward, at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we recommended approval of the rezoning subject to several conditions, one being that any traffic improvements be determined by the traffic study. And so we ended up taking it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they did recommend approval of the rezoning subject to several conditions, one being that those traffic improvements be found from the traffic study and be agreed to by the city and the developer. Several other conditions that were looked at that the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed is there's an area at the southeast corner of this parcel, and in this slide it's shown in green. I think it's about 11 acres or so of the property that the Iowa DOT was recommending that we reserve for future right-of-way. You can't see it because it's underneath the green area, but the DOT did a corridor study several years ago which helped the 58 and Viking Road project, but they're showing a potential interchange at Highway 20 and Highway 58, which may include needing some of this property. So the developer is showing this area as future right-of-way and is not planning to develop it at this time. And so we wanted that as a condition as well, that they won't put any structures, buildings, or anything within this area just in case the DOT happens to need it in the future. Another condition that staff looked at was currently to the property to the west is a mobile home park. And what we talked with the developer on is if that property were to ever develop in the future, providing the necessary cross-access easement to that property if it were to ever redevelop into, say, a commercial use years down the road. So you wouldn't have to go out to Ridgeway, back onto Ridgeway, and then back onto this site. So one of the conditions that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended was to provide an access easement to that property to the west, and that if that property ever does redevelop, that the developer will install a cross-access drive to get to that property. Another condition was that currently along Ridgeway Avenue, there are no sidewalks located in front of this property. One of the conditions is that they will install a 5-foot wide sidewalk along the entire street frontage. Again, there's no sidewalk on the south side of Ridgeway, but there is a recreational trail on the north side that goes from Chancellor, and then it stops right at Nordic Drive. And so we want to continue the connectivity, and then the trail picks up just on the east side of Highway 58. So we do want to see the sidewalk connection maintained along Ridgeway so you can eventually connect in with the trail system on the east side of Highway 58. And again, we'll work with the developer on the location of that and see where the necessary room for that is. And then another condition was the interior of the site, providing sidewalk connections into the interior of the site. This proposed development will include a large retail store and then several other smaller retail stores and then several other smaller outlots that don't have potential uses at this time. But what we want to see is that, if someone comes in and parks on the site, if they want to get to one of the retail buildings or to one of the outlots, that they have a safe way to do it if they want to do it by foot and not have to get back in their car. So they will be providing sidewalks to and from each of the lots within the interior of the site. So at this time, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning, subject to those conditions. Again, the Planning and Zoning recommended approval of the rezoning as well. And again, we will be reviewing the traffic study that came in. One of the things that staff is working on with the developer is we are setting up a public meeting next Monday to discuss any of the proposed traffic improvements We sent out some letters to the surrounding business owners in the industrial park. One of the proposed traffic improvements may be to potentially put in a right-in, right-out at Nordic Drive, which could have an impact to the businesses to the north. So what we want to do is, in concert with the developer, hold a public meeting and get comments from the local business owners on that. So that will be occurring next Monday evening at the Public Works Building. So,
Thank you, Shane.
and the developer is here to answer any questions if you have any.
Very good. Thank you. Open it up now for public comment. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your time. My name is John Silverman with Midland Atlantic Development Company. For your record, my address is 8044 Montgomery Road, Suite 370, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45236. Thank you for your time, and many thanks to Shane and the staff. We have enjoyed our time in Cedar Falls. We are not residents of Cedar Falls, but we're property owners here. We own the Target Center on Viking Road in 58 and developed that project about a dozen years or so ago, and have enjoyed our activity in this town and in the city, and really appreciate being here. This project, it will be a continuation of the quality that we have down at the Target Center. As I said, we've enjoyed working with staff through the process. We look forward to more discussions. We look forward to the neighborhood meeting. We enjoy those meetings and enjoy input from the adjacent property owners and people in the community, and appreciate the time.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Anybody further? Hearing and seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Item 6 is pass an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances by removing property located in the southwest corner of Highway 58 and West Ridgeway from agricultural to highway commercial district, subject to certain conditions upon its first consideration. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Open it for council.
Mr. Mayor, I would just reiterate what came up in planning and zoning, that with this being a gateway property for the city, that the aesthetic standard probably would be a little higher than we might do elsewhere. But that would just be a key consideration for me.
Sure. Thank you. Anything further from council? Roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 7 is a public hearing on proposed rezoning of property located at the north end of Lakeshore Drive. Is there a motion to file proof of publication?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any communication is filed with the city clerk?
We did receive one communication this afternoon, which was forwarded to council, placed before council. It's placed in the back of the book.
Thank you. Again, before all comments, this time staff David Sturch will explain some information for this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a rezoning request at the north end of Lakeshore Drive. It's a 20-acre parcel, and I've got some slides too there. It's shown at in the yellow box there. Again, just under 21 acres, rezoning from current use of agriculture, A1, to R1 residential. Again, as we look at rezoning requests, we evaluate 3 separate criteria, one being the land use, and the corridor along First Street Union Road is identified for future residential low-density growth. And what that means is 1 to 4 units per acre, single-family detached structures, and that's the intent of this development and rezoning on this. So it matches the land use map. Other issues we look at are existing utilities, street connections. There is a sewer main extension off the north end of Lakeshore Drive that actually goes into this property and heads east to a lift station, and then from there it goes north and then down the river. So basically the development will utilize that existing sewer. There's water main extensions that will run up to this area for that new development. And we identified a future sanitary sewer that will run along the north end of this property that will actually open up the western portions of the city over to Union Road. So that's kind of a future project. But this site here has got the sanitary water main and street connection, which is in north end of Lakeshore Drive. Other features we take a look at, as you can see on the map along the north and the west side of the property, there's some environmental features, sensitive land features. Approximately 9 acres of that, of the 20, is in the floodplain. Got some steep slopes and significant tree stands. Those streams meander through those areas. So as we look at the plat, we look at those sensitive areas, steep slopes, wetlands, and we kind of take a look at the grading of the development. The intent is to basically control that development within and surrounding areas and then release it into these areas, but those sensitive features are going to be identified as outlots, so kind of areas that they won't impact as part of this development. So that's part of the platting process, as actually we're looking at that right now in P&Z. But as far as the rezoning, Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this rezoning request. Ms. Danielson mentioned that there was a petition that was submitted to this afternoon to the council and staff, and there were some bullets or conditions, I guess, or requests from those nearby property owners to kind of take a look at that plat and make those considerations. And again, that's kind of what we're working on right now from the preliminary plat. So as this rezoning goes through, we're going to get the plat through the commission too this month. So I think the developer's here for any questions.
I'll open it up. If you're done, open it up for the public to comment. Anyone? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tammy Stahl. I live at 1009 Lakeshore Drive. I have the property immediately to the south of the proposed development. This is a perfect time, I guess, to have this discussion with it being Earth Science Preservation time. So, and this is a wetland that is adjacent to it. So it is really sensitive and unusual. And I think it's really important to treat it as such and not bulldoze into it like it's just a regular property, especially with the wetlands and a dam associated with it, the only privately owned dam in the state that's kind of being attacked from all sides. And with this property, we're appreciative of some of the suggestions or things we've talked about in developing this, but we're really concerned that it's not really being looked into and studied for the water flow issues that are happening, both from coming from the street and also from the pond and often over the dam. And then also there's huge water flow issues that are coming from Skyview that are already coming down onto Lakeshore and aren't being dealt with, that we're having to deal with. And these aren't little issues. These are issues that are leaving ravines on the property that are unimaginable, really, unless you look at them. Unfortunately, I tried to invite everyone here to see what was happening publicly with the developer and everyone there so you could see for yourself. And I've been told that there are issues, told by the lawyer that there are issues in communicating with you and having a meeting with you individually or even as a group, which is unfortunate. But I haven't been told that you couldn't come, Mr. Mayor, so I would like to personally invite you to come out and see for yourself some of the water issues that we're having. We have like a new waterway that's developing at the end of our street with a like foot-deep ravine that's going through, and it's made a huge ravine at the end where it drops into the stream that has developed to 45 feet long. And I'm trying not to exaggerate, so these are, I'm calling it less than what it is, but 45 feet long, like 11 feet wide, and over 9 feet deep. That's how much water is rushing from the end of our street through this ravine. And I just don't think that it's really been delved into the water issues that are happening so that we can prevent further harm coming to our pond and lake than we're already experiencing. And so I just wish I could see a study being done to really look at the impact and to make sure that it's being dealt with delicately and treated as such. And I guess that's it for now. But I guess I do want to say, too, right now everything's wet. So I want you to know that I'm not trying to make judgment on what's been happening the past month, these are issues, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, that have really been impacting our area. And when it did quit raining last week and we went to look through, kind of take a look at the property, there was still standing water, and some of it was even oily looking, that's sitting there, that's coming from properties up above that aren't being dealt with. So I guess we would like to also see water issues in that direction, not just upstream, be looked into, and take care of those things before jumping into this next project. We're not totally against having new neighbors, and we want us all to be good neighbors to each other. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stahl. Open up to further? Yes.
Good evening. Steve Drosky with CGA Engineers, planner representing the developer on this project. We thank the neighbors for their letter and their concerns, and I just want you to know that the developer is agreeable in principle to all of the comments and concerns that the neighbors have. Right now, we're looking at a rezoning to single-family homes, and we are working with the engineering department and the planning department to go through the specifics of some of those water issues. We do understand it's a unique site, and we are working with the city to make sure everybody can leave happy.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Further open up the public comment before we move on? Hearing and seeing none, now close the public hearing. Item 8 is pass an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances by removing property located at the north end of Lakeshore Drive from agricultural district and placing the same as residential district. Upon its first consideration, is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion. I need a second. Yes, thank you. Motion second. Open it up for council. Questions? Mr. Boer?
Yeah, I have a question for staff. 2 weeks ago, when this was on our agenda to put it up for public hearing, I specifically asked staff for a water impact analysis report prior to discussing this, and I was assured by staff I would have that. I don't have that. Now, I like the R1, but I don't understand why my request wasn't honored.
They're going through that right now for the stormwater detention for those kind of on-site detention basins, so that's under study right now. They're going to get that in here in a few days for us to take a look at that. But that's part of the platting process when we take a look at the preliminary plat to make sure all the on-site runoff is collected in a 100-year event and then released at a controlled rate. So right now it's an uncontrolled rate, so as part of that plat, they're going to do some storm sewer work and rerouting some storm sewers and then create these detention basins for the runoff of those areas. So that's kind of under study right now.
But my request was to have it before we discussed it, but I have absolutely nothing.
You'll have that for the plat, the preliminary plat.
This is just rezoning.
Yeah, this is the rezoning part.
Is that the difference?
It's as a condition for the preliminary plat, they submit those documents so that we can start looking at those runoff calculations and grading calculations.
Yeah.
Mr. Whelan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As has been said twice, this is simply changing the zoning. All of you will have another chance to come to the council to see if the issues that have been identified in your letter are being worked on. My experience with the city of Cedar Falls, when they get a letter like this, they take it seriously, and they do their diligence to find solutions. I think Mr. Sturch has also indicated that. So I welcome you back, and if you need to get status reports, talk to any of your council people or the mayor, but you will have a lot more opportunities to look at the water issues. And I do plan to come out there tomorrow and take a look and see what's going on and how the recent flooding has affected you. So thank you for coming, and thank you for your letter.
Mr. Cruz?
Mr. Sturch, if you could clarify then in this description, you're saying 9 acres are in the floodplain, so that would not be developable?
Yeah, those are indicated as outlots, and so basically it's a riparian easement that'll be established across that area that basically prohibits any grading, filling, changing of the land. So those areas will be kind of conveyed to those adjacent property owners just
like
to
a big
maintain
backyard?
it's open. It's part of their backyard.
Wildlife
yeah.
type of thing?
Yep.
Okay.
The intent is just to keep the tree stands and ravine alone with this development.
So then there are 12 acres for development, is what you're saying, excluding floodplain and steep slope area?
Yeah, all the lots are out of the floodplain. It'll be located out of
So the steep slope area, when you approach that lot, it goes uphill towards, what's it called, Skyview? It looks like there'd be a significant runoff of water coming down into the lake. Is that,
Everything's going to go northeast direction. Nothing from this property is going to get drained into the lake. That's how the grading is set up.
Mr.
okay.
Whelan?
I'm just
do you have
concerned about the
Thank you,
steep slope and the oil.
I have a question related to what's been just discussed. In the past, when we have developed housing in areas that have floodplain, a lot could include the floodplain, but there could be no building in the floodplain. So if the lot had enough high ground, you could put a house on it, but you couldn't do anything with the area. Is that the same here? Is that same rule in place?
We do have that in the ordinance. Basically, the rear yards can be in the floodplain, but in this case, the lots will not be in the floodplain.
That's the way we'll see the site plan come through.
The plat is identified on that.
anything?
Quick
Hang on
follow-up
one
then.
second. Anyone else? Sorry, down here. Mr. Green, sorry, we'll go to you.
Mr.
Frank.
Mayor, we're looking at the documents from the Liquid Hills LOA. I can appreciate what they list for their concerns and what remedies they suggest. And as I understand it from the developer, they'd be amenable to address these issues. So I'm leery about the approval, but as I'm seeing that this rezoning, as I understand it, allows us to move forward, it gives confidence in doing these studies and saying it's worth our time because we know that we're in a spot to move forward. With that being the case, that takes off some of my reservations about approving this. And that's it.
Okay. Mr. Darrow?
Rob pretty much covered what I was going to ask, but I wouldn't mind some assurance from Dave that you're going to be working with a developer to respond to these issues tonight.
Yeah, those will be conditions listed in the staff report and in the plating process.
And then when this comes back, is there one reading or three readings or?
Well, the schedule is 3 readings, so if it goes through the 3rd reading early November, that's the tentative date that we get this through Planning and Zoning Commission and then the preliminary plat at that same meeting.
So there's 3 more opportunities to see how we've responded to these concerns. Okay, great.
Mr. Cruz?
A couple things on the mention about the oil. How would that be addressed? Is there going to be some subsoil samples to, the engineer can address that, or somebody could address how that would be? If there's oil runoff or leakage.
Do we have any information on that yet, David,
No.
for those rezoning
Okay.
right now? Yeah.
That'd be a concern, I guess, because of groundwater safety. And then would there be a situation because of the slope, steep slope area, that part of this would stay A1 and not be rezoned to R1 because of the non-ability to use it?
As part of the rezoning process, we take a look at the rezoning of the land for the entire property. So that's the petition as we ran it through and published that.
I'd like to clarify just a couple points on that. We don't require groundwater sampling as a part of a subdivision plat proposal. It's not an area in our subdivision code at this point. It's possible that observing some oil might just be runoff from the street possibly, but I couldn't speak for certain about this situation. And in terms of the steep slopes, that's going to be getting to the areas that are designated as outlots and how those won't be developed. So they'll be preserved even though they're rezoned. The back areas of the lots will not be built on.
So it'd be R1 but not usable.
Correct. Through the preliminary plat and the final plat, it will show those as outlots that are not to be developed.
Okay.
Anything further from council? Mr. Whelan?
Yeah, in your meeting on the 17th of September, you had one state representative that was there, Representative Kresick. You have other state representatives. I guess my question is there any involvement they can have in this or any support for finding solutions to the issues? Was Bob able to indicate the possibility of help from the state?
So, Councilman Whelan, we've met with several of the property owners of the subdivision right to the south of the area we're considering rezoning. We've met with them over probably about a 2 or 3 year period at different times to talk about the issues. And we've had both Kressig and Danielson attend some of those meetings, and they've talked about whether there might be grants through the state in terms of water quality, where maybe there's a proposal that while they know that the pond might need to be dredged just like it was about 20 to 25 years ago, maybe there are solutions, best management practices like a sediment forebay that could be installed where they might be able to get some grant funding for that, that they do that at the same time as the dredging. Those are situations that we've talked about and said that would certainly be something that we would bring forward for City Council to support if that's something that they wanted to move forward with, requesting a grant, something like that.
Thank you.
Has one more thing.
Sure, Frank.
Could you clarify what the city's responsibility is regarding the dam itself? It's a privately owned dam, so what's the city's responsibility? Or is there any?
Because it's privately owned, there is no city responsibility for the dam. So what we would be assuring is that the development to the north is not contributing to any additional issues with that. As David's described, the water will be routing north and east, so it should not contribute further to the dam. Although one area that we're working with the developer on is providing an easement for access on the opposite side, because that is an area that is actually on the developer side of the property, and so they're going to be providing access for that so that it could be maintained on the north side.
And then the easement wouldn't be able to be developed, obviously.
Correct.
Anything further from council? Been motion, second, requires a roll call vote, please.
Six voting aye, one voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item F is old business. F1 is pass ordinance 2931, amending the Code of Ordinances relative to design guidelines in the Central Business District overlay. Upon its third and final consideration, is there a motion, please?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion, second. Any further discussion from council? There's a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. G1 is new business consent calendar. The following items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the public or council requests an item to be pulled specifically for comment. Any such requests from council? From the public? I'll summarize briefly the consent calendar. Item A is receive and file the Committee of the Whole minutes of September 17th. B is receive and file a communication from the Civil Service Commission relative to a certified list for the position of Information Systems Technician 1. C is receive and file monthly reports. D is approve a request for street closure and parking variance for the Pink Ribbon Run on October 6, 2018. E is approving applications for permits and licenses. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is a resolution calendar. These items will be acted upon by a roll call vote in a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests an item to be pulled specifically for that purpose. Any such request from council?
Item D?
D is in David.
Yes. And H is in Henry.
H is in Henry. Anyone else from council?
I have an item. I don't really necessarily want to pull it, but I'd like to make a comment on it.
You can just pull it real fast and comment if that's okay with you.
I'd like to make a comment on F. F.
F is in Frank. Anything further from council? From the public? Hearing and seeing none, I'll review the resolution calendar minus those items. A through C are resolutions levying a final assessment for costs incurred by the city to mow property located at 1028 West 12th Street, 424 Balboa Avenue, and 933 West 13th Street. E has been pulled. E is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an amendment agreement relative to the city's management software. Item G is approving and authorizing execution of a 28E agreement with the Iowa Alcoholic Beverages Division. I is a resolution approving and accepting completion of public improvements in the Arbor's 3rd edition J is approving and authorizing execution of purchase agreements, grading easements, and utility easements in conjunction with the West First Street reconstruction project. K is resolution approving and authorizing change orders for the 2017 levy project. L is resolution approving a purchase agreement and utility easement in conjunction with the levy project. M is approving and accepting completion of traffic signal improvements. N and O are resolutions approving and authorizing execution of a license agreement relative to installing a fiber optic telecommunications system. P is resolution approving and accepting the low bids and contracts relative to housing rehabilitation projects. Q is approving a central business district overlay site plan. R is approving and authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with Waterloo and Intercog for the CBDG and home programs. S is approving and authorizing execution of a professional service agreement with Intercog relative to fair housing. And T is a resolution of support for a grant application for the Blackhawk County Gaming Association relative to the downtown streetscape project. Is there a motion to approve the resolution calendar minus those items?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion from council? Requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving back to item D, it reads a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement relative to a downtown parking study. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Open for discussion. Questions?
Question I had, Mr. Mayor, and staff, the city staff formed a parking study committee. I was just curious who's on that committee.
Do we know that, staff?
I can take that, Mayor. Jackie Danielson, city clerk, is part of the committee because she's in charge of our parking enforcement. Myself, I'm on the committee. Karen Howard from our planning area to kind of help us with a lot of the things that deal with planning and what's going development downtown. Mark Ripplinger is on the committee as well. And then we have Kelly Stern, who actually works at the library, who we thought would be a great representative on the committee since the library itself will, be part of the study since they're downtown. And Craig Birdie is also on the committee since obviously police works a lot with parking and issues and that. So I think I got everybody.
Very good.
And then the next question is, we had 6 proposals. How varied are they? Do we get to see those as a council comment? How much of a difference was there from the $48,475 that we accepted or are appearing to accept?
Sure. Roughly, I can tell you they range from about $25,000 to $90,000. But now, taking that into account, some of them also phrased it like they had a fee, plus then they would charge out-of-pocket costs and some of those things. So we kind of had to wade through that a little bit. But I would say we probably had 3 of them that were right in this $40,000 range. We had 6 proposals. We did interviews with 3 of them. Do I have that right? 3? And did some follow-up questions with our top 2. And so we really put a lot of thought into it. We had kind of a criteria system we used to rate the proposals to come up with the ones that we thought that serve us the best.
So have we used this firm before?
We have not, of course.
Do you have any
I
track
don't know
record?
if we've ever done a formal parking study, or if we have, it's been a long time.
Okay.
But we did get references from other cities,
Okay.
for a lot of them we asked for references.
Okay, I do see in the proposed fee, the $48,475, and then it says additional services over and above a written scope of services will be billed at $150 an hour. So I guess I'm concerned about the assurance that the $48,000 and change would cover it. And since we haven't had a study done before that we paid for.
I think that's one of the reasons when we got their contract, we were very interested to see what they outlined in their scope of work to make sure it was what we expected it to be. So the committee all reviewed that to make sure. I think we also know that we could get through this whole process and there might be an additional service we want them to do. I'm just making this up, but it could be we want them to do a study for the College Hill area next or something like that, So I don't think that concerned us when they said that because in even checking references from other cities, I think we heard from a couple where they said, they used someone and then
and then we're actually having them back again to do another study. So I don't think that really concerned us.
So it does say when authorized in writing, so we have to
Right.
approve the additional.
We would come back with another contract, another scope of services for that price. Yep.
Okay, no further questions on that.
Thank you. Anyone else on council? Been motion, second, requires a roll call vote, please.
Voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item F reads a resolution approving and authorizing placement of a Gold Star Family Monument in Veterans Memorial Park, subject to funding by private donations as recommended by the Parks and Recreation Commission. Is there a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, second. Further comments or questions?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on this. I think it's a fantastic project, and I wanted to thank everyone for making it happen. I specifically wanted to thank Sid Morris and Mike Butler for all their work on this. Thank you.
You bet.
Can I add, our thoughts are out to Sid tonight. He, a couple of weeks ago, fell and broke his ribs, and he's broken his back for the city for years, so it'd be good for us to think about him now.
All best wishes for the Iowan Citizen of the Year this year at the State Fair. Anybody else? Been motion, second, requires a roll call vote, please.
Voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item H reads a resolution approving an authorization and execution of a letter of agreement with U.S. Homeland Security relative to our levy. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second. Open for discussion or questions?
Just some clarification. The levy status of completion, are we approaching 100% or other than cosmetics? We got the structural part of the dam back?
Everything should be done by the end of the construction season, so that's obviously winding down. We're kind of predicting that before Thanksgiving time. There could be some minor items that do not get done, some sort of finished grading, seeding, that could roll into the spring of next year, but I believe they have made excellent progress in segment 4, which is the Peter Melanie Park area. I think they're getting close to finishing up about half of that segment, and then they'll be starting on the other half. So they're on track to complete that this year. So that would be the end of the major work. There are other smaller items, but this construction season it will be wrapped up.
Just the cosmetics would be left for?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, then when we're requesting, it looks like this PAL, could you clarify, is this going to label more part of our town out of the flood zone, 100-year flood zone, 500-year flood zone? What are we gaining here with this?
It's basically a requirement by FEMA. So if we do not go through this process, they would, my understanding is they would look at the community as if there were no levy in place.
No increase or just the old levy height?
They wouldn't, I don't believe, we have to certify even the old levy height. So they would look at it as if there were no levy whatsoever. So it's an accreditation process, just basically giving the assurances that it was built according to the required design standards, and it is providing the protection level that it's advertised at.
And then this would be something homeowners would use on their homeowners insurance?
That's my understanding, yes.
Improve.
Unfortunately, FEMA and the U.S. Army Corps don't communicate because all of those documents that we had to submit for the design of the levee, now FEMA's coming back and asking through the accreditation process. So it's an additional hoop we get to jump through.
And this is done how often? This PAL?
I don't believe there is a specific requirement on how often it is done. This is the first time I've seen this or heard of this, so I don't think this is going to be a regular occurrence. On an annual basis, the Army Corps of Engineers does review our levee and make sure it's, they look for problems and make recommendations, and we address those every year. So I don't think we'll have to go through this again, but you know,
do with more of the levee itself than the flood maps that FEMA redid a number of years ago in different counties. Okay. No further questions?
Anything else further from council? So motion is second on the table. This requires a roll call vote, please.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I don't think I'm missing anything else from being pulled. Okay. Are we sure? Item 3 is pass an ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances relative to keeping of chickens and ducks upon its first consideration. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Motion second. I'm going to have council, with your permission, I'll have staff just mention some things pertaining to what is on the table and the ordinance, and then we'll certainly open it for discussion.
I'll just go over a couple highlights from the staff report that was included with the ordinance. This is following up on a committee discussion on August 20th regarding chickens, and ducks was part of the discussion as well. In the staff report, we included a listing of the various items that council asked be prepared as a part of the ordinance, and that was the foundation for what we were bringing forward here for consideration this evening. And so what we're proposing is an amendment to Chapter 6. It would specifically be the ordinance about animals, and it's sections 6-113 and 6-114. And the approach to the chicken and duck amendment here is to approach it as a license similar to dogs and cats. So since they're a small animal, just like dogs and cats, we thought that the licensing approach could accomplish many of the recommendations that the council was wanting to accomplish with the ordinance versus property uses that a stable or a kennel might trigger, where you might want a land use permit and you start to get into needing to make changes to your zoning ordinance as well, so that you have consistent approaches and that your ordinance is tied together. So that is why we recommend the licensing approach with the smaller animals. The requirements for obtaining a license include that the owner needs to obtain an annual license, that there'd be a limit of 3 animals, any combination of ducks or chickens, that it be in an enclosed coop, that it be in the rear yard and at least 25 feet from any other residential dwelling that's outside of that property, and that there are some upkeep and maintenance requirements related to the coop and keeping the animal. And then also having the license helps with if there is some type of health declaration made that might involve an advisory related to having chickens or ducks, then we're able to contact all of the owners that are registered and let them know about that. And if that might mean, for example, that we might need to revoke permits for a while, the licenses for a while, then that could be accomplished. So with that, we have the draft ordinance tonight for discussion in the first reading, and we'll welcome any comments from the council.
Open it up to council. Mr. Miller?
Stephanie, am I understanding that right? Then the change was made to go to more of an animal licensing versus the original proposal that I made was to bring back the ordinance from 2016. So that change was to go, that you guys determined was to go to a licensing model versus land use per se?
As we talked about the different nuances of adopting a code like that, it included a land use permit, which would meet the original ordinance that was talked about in your motion. And so then we would need to make some revisions to the zoning ordinance as well, so that everything was aligned. And that would mean that we would have to pause. We would need to make some zoning amendments and take that through the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then we'd bring that all together to the council, both the zoning ordinance and the animal updates.
Thank you.
Mr. Boone.
You said you modeled this after the cats and dogs. Will the cats and dogs require vaccinations? What vaccinations are required of these animals?
The proposed ordinance has no vaccination requirements proposed for chickens or ducks. Jen has a veterinarian friend that we talked to a little bit about, are there vaccinations for chickens? As we understand, a lot of that's accomplished through the feed that they're given versus a vaccination.
And then another question would be, if a neighbor didn't want that, if they didn't want their neighbor to have them, they didn't want to see them, there's no Board of Adjustment review, or so what would a neighbor do if they were unhappy about seeing a neighbor's coop?
At this point, there would be no remedy. Even the original ordinance didn't propose that the property owners needed to sign off on that or be notified. So either way, there wasn't a property owner notification involved. We would, if a property owner were concerned, we would certainly check into whether they're meeting all of the conditions of having the license. If that's the approach that we take, we could verify that type of thing, because we included the that we would be allowed to go onto the property to investigate the matter, just like we do with dogs or cats.
Okay, and then my last question, I promise, is I have had other people ask, well, so if we're going to allow these kind of animals, are we going to allow others such as goats or pigs? If someone wanted another type of animal, would they simply need to approach us to have that added to this?
Certainly in this section 6 is where we're dealing with exceptions to agricultural animals. Section 6 is about agricultural animals. If we wanted to get into larger animals, then we'd probably really need to think about our zoning ordinance as well, because just like a horse needs a stable, then we have certain conditions in our zoning ordinance under which those could be allowed.
Anything further from council? Mr. Whelan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Susan DeBoer brought up the question, do neighbors have the right to have an impact on whether there are chickens located next to them? The reason I raised that question, I'm sure Sue did, is I've had people throughout the community, not a large number, but when the discussion gets around to chickens, I don't want them next to me. So the general answer I've got is I'd prefer not to have them. I had heard that Waterloo had an ordinance that required that. So I looked into it, and it does not directly have that in their ordinance, but it does say under their section H26, urban animal hobby farms, when an applicant can demonstrate that such a use will not constitute a nuisance on adjoining property. And that kind of gets to the adjoining property have a right to bring up their concerns. We don't have this in that ordinance. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan. Anyone else further from council? Mr. Green?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I, like Councilman Miller, originally moving it forward, I was looking at approving the original ordinance. And this one I see is very different from that original in quite a few ways. And one of the biggest, for me, the biggest concerns is the enforcement mechanism for it. Because what this ordinance states, I'll say for the previous ordinance, I have it up here now, it states that the land use permit was going to be the venue for being able to inspect a coop and to basically set a property as being permissible to allow up to 3 chickens or 3 ducks as the change was occurring. Well, with this one, it's a licensing procedure. So my question is, how do you prove that as an observer, like somebody's allowed to have this particular chicken, as opposed to saying, oh, well, we know this property it's valid for having 3 chickens. So I see it almost not too dissimilar from the fireworks issue. It's that enforcement practicality of it, and there's nothing in here about the like tagging or how you would ensure that the bird that you brought in to be licensed is the one that you're actually keeping on you. That original ordinance would have dealt with those kinds of issues because in my view, that one treated chickens and ducks as much more of the agricultural animals category, where I feel like what was brought for us to approve tonight puts chickens and ducks into the pet category. And I just can't see chickens and ducks as pets. I totally agree with the idea of allowing these for eggs and for like the education to show where your food comes from and to have it done very carefully. But once it starts getting to, I'm going to have a chicken, my coop isn't going to be inspected. I don't have to get a permit. It's going to be our family pet, and he'll stay outside. But maybe sometimes they'll come in. You start getting into that slippery slope, and so that being the case, I wouldn't feel comfortable approving it as is. I would love to see this go back to committee, and ideally for us to come forward and approve the ordinance that was in 2016, or to consider that for approval rather than this one. So my motion would be to refer this item to committee, and I don't think I have to motion anything else.
There's a motion on the table to amend the original to, pardon me?
Other discussion?
Motion to refer to committee?
Refer to committee.
Discussion.
We have other discussion, Mr. Mayor?
Second first.
Well, I need a second here. Are we lost?
Yeah. I thought we didn't have a motion.
Doesn't this have to be an amendment because it is,
Yes.
there is a motion and a second?
There's a motion and second to approve as is. This is a motion to amend to go to committee. There's one motion on the table for that. Is there a second? You can see, pardon me?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and second to have the chickens go to committee.
To discuss the differences there.
Is there open for discussion on that amendment? Yes. Any further discussion?
I guess I would just ask the council members, how much staff time do we want to dedicate to this particular issue after having discussed it a year and a half ago, discussed it a month ago, and now going to discuss it again after staff drafted an ordinance?
Sorry.
So I'm just wondering how much of an investment are we going to put in this particular ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask for 0 time investment and to bring forward the other ordinance for approval or disapproval.
Anything further?
I was just going to address some of the concerns brought up by fellow council on the nuisance aspect of this, because we have the noise, the litter, the smell ordinances in our code that we're micromanaging a chicken, and the smell from a cat litter box can be more foul than a few chickens would be. So I don't have a problem with this ordinance, but I also agree with Mr. Green here that if we want to keep it alive, to go back to committee and switch back to the other ordinance if that's appropriate.
Very good. Any further comments on the amendment to the original motion?
I will, Mayor. I think we're getting too involved with this. I don't, to Tom's point, I don't really want to see a whole lot more staff time invested in chickens or ducks, although I would like to see this ordinance pass. To Darrell's point, we've got nuisance ordinances. Those apply whether this is a licensing issue or whether it's a land use issue. And if there is an issue from a neighbor, code enforcement can go out and measure if it's 25 feet away from a house or if it's not, or all of the details of this are managed. I think the way I understand it, staff was trying to find a way to get this put through without a zoning change, I guess is the way I understand it, so I appreciate that. It's a couple chickens, folks. So.
Anything further from council on the amendment to go to committee on the original motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
I think I've got it there. Do you have it, Jackie?
We've got Miller, nay. DeBrun, nay.
Petition the House, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we're petitioning the House now.
Thank you.
Yes. How many were voting nay there, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. That does not pass for the amendment to go to committee. We're now back on the original motion as read originally. Any further discussion?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I've had a couple conversations about this anyway, with looking at adding more chickens, and considering this is the 3rd time we've had this, we don't hear of a whole lot of complaints on chickens in this community. I gotta think, if you want to look at this, I disagree with Mr. Green on the pet side of this. You can look at chickens for egg production or pet production. I mean, when this originally came up, it was because there were a couple folks that had some chickens as pets. Their kids loved them, the neighbors loved them. I don't think we need to get into determining why people want a pet. I mean, we don't do it with dogs or cats. And to me, this is just, whether it's a pet or whether it's for egg production, there's a benefit for people to be able to have chickens. And I would hope that we could pass this after the 3rd time, and let's give it a year and see how many complaints we have about chickens, and we go from there.
Mr. Blanchard.
Mayor, I guess as the converse to Mr. Miller's statement, we don't have an overwhelming number of people that are pushing this either. I think we had a couple of residents that contacted you advocating for it. So I don't think on either side of the issue there's an alarming majority that are pushing for it either, or complaining about the existing ones.
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
There were plenty of people that got a hold of me in 2016, more than a couple, and it's a responsibility as council people. If people bring something else up and they would like us to move it through council, that's our job. So whether it's 2 or whether it's 400, there's nothing out of line about bringing this forward.
Cruz.
I had a chance to take a unofficial survey this past weekend when we had a neighborhood garage sale, and I tried to ask everyone that I knew was in Cedar Falls attending my garage sale, and I says, what do you think of backyard chickens? And of course, no roosters was a comment, and uniformly everybody loved the idea. They thought it'd be really exciting to have an opportunity to teach the children of the neighborhood where eggs come from and that sort of thing. And whether you call them a pet or a production animal for eggs, it's just a blurry line, and we already have them in town. I don't know if anybody knows how many flocks of chickens we have already in town. Anybody have an idea? Rob, you're usually good at this. You have an idea?
Mr. Cruz.
Yeah. But actually, I'd like to amend this to go to a higher number than 3, because if you want to have egg production for a family, you purchase a number of chickens. It takes 6 months for them to start to lay eggs as a pullet. The eggs are small, and then from there, they produce eggs 1 a day or 6 out of 7 days a week. And then after about 3 years, they stop laying eggs. Then you need to replace those and circulate through. Looking at the list of other cities that have urban chickens, Waterloo, Dubuque, and Ames have no limit. Clive has 12, Des Moines has 30 plus. I did call Ames and asked them if they had any concerns brought forward by the city, and they said they didn't have anything. The city clerk couldn't think of any time where there was a problem with a duck or chicken. So for fear of getting booed, I want to amend this to 12 chickens, or more than 3.
What, you have to be more specific. A motion to amend to go from
12
to 12, okay. Is there a second for that motion to the original ordinance? Hearing no second, that does fail. We're now back to the original motion. It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion from council?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Wieland.
I agree with Council Miller. We spent far too much time on this. People's minds have been made up, like I said last meeting, for the last 10 minutes. It's interesting we spend less time passing a $100 million budget than we have spent on chickens. But it's also exciting that that's the worst issue we have to deal with in this city. Go to Waterloo and see what they're dealing with. It's time to vote.
There's the original motion. Any further discussion on the original motion as presented? I will open up for the public if you want to ask some questions. Close it.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one question. Attorney Rogers isn't here, but if this were to be approved, I know that there are grandfathered chickens already in the city because we put a ban on it, and so they're authorized to keep it. If this were approved, and then we decided later on that we wanted to ban them again, would there still be that grandfathering effect that anybody who had them would still continue to be allowed to have them, or does that claw back, so to speak?
I think that would be up to the council. The council could pass a new ordinance that would say, chickens have to cease and desist immediately, or they could also say, everybody that has chickens can currently keep them.
Okay.
In motion, second, discuss. I appreciate that. This does require a roll call vote, please.
3 voting aye, 4 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does not pass. Moving on to item H. Is there a motion to allow bills and payroll?
Motion to approve bills and payroll.
Second.
Motion second requires a roll call vote, please. Oh, sorry.
Got to reset.
Hang on, it was Jackie recorded.
Yeah.
No pressure.
I think we're good to go, please, on the bills and payroll. Mr. Cruz.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item I, does council have any referrals this evening? Does council have any updates? I did have a couple quick updates for council. Something, I guess, unfortunately, that fell into the city's radar this last August was a young lady, Natalie Olson, who lives here in town, has muscular dystrophy. Her and her dad, Dan Olson, flew out to Seattle in August last minute to speak to a few thousand firefighters about a new drug therapy she's getting. Part of that she thanked because the funds for the Labor Day Fill the Boot project that we do. There's Natalie there on the screen. Unfortunately, Cedar Falls didn't participate this year in the Fill the Boot, mainly because risk management here at the city thought 18th and Main was too dangerous. So I've been promised by our fire chief that we'll hit a location or two next year and make up for this year's lack of having one. So a great honor for the Olsons to go out there and for Miss Natalie to give them their thanks. The next update was a groundbreaking you might have heard of at the Green Hill Park here in Cedar Falls for the Place to Play Park. I can just convey that Amanda Wakers and a couple, Sarah and Chris Corkery, along with others, their main effort, they were mainly in charge of raising or responsible for $1 million for this park. Kids at Hanson Elementary raised $10,000 to $13,000. Cookie sales, pop can sales were around $10,000. Generous folks gave over a couple $100,000, I believe, and other generous givings from our foundation groups and for our funding organizations. Black Hawk County Gaming came through again with a very, very large gift that probably prompted the point where we're at right now. So, and the city will do some in-kind work towards the effort. So, amazing city we live in, very generous, and thanks to the council in terms of what we're doing there for the in-kind gifts. Moving on to item K, it's a motion to move to executive session to discuss property acquisition per Iowa Code Section 2151J to discuss the purchase or sale of particular real estate. This to follow public forum. It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Requires a roll call vote, please. Mr. Cruz, you're still blinking over there, sir.
Okay, I hit it once.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item L is public forum. In this section of the agenda, speakers will have one opportunity to speak up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak tonight? See one, and a couple others will grab you. Yep, thank you. Just your name and your address and microphone right there, please.
Tammy Stahl, 1009 Lakeshore Drive. My topic is basically what I spoke on before regarding the rezoning of our property and water issues that we're having. And I would like to present that outside of just the rezoning issue and present it as an ongoing issue that I would like to talk about. I'm concerned that we're having a huge onslaught in the past 5 years of waters coming from the public going onto our private property, significantly eroding and damaging our dam. And I would like help from the city to look into this. I already talked about some of the erosion issues that were happening. I also have been told that there are monies available that could be used if chosen to do so through the developmental impact fee that's being collected, but we've kind of been abandoned and hung out to dry even though public waters are going through our property. And we really, really would, we know none of this is happening on purpose, that it's part of the process, but we would just love to see the city be even a little bit of a partner with us in dealing with this. There were some things that were mentioned earlier that made me think that maybe you're looking a little more into those lines. Once again, I'd like to invite you, Mr. Mayor Brown, to come in and visit and take a look. If I need to call, let me know. Otherwise, I hope to hear from you.
You're welcome to call.
Let's see. I have been told that I have to ask you if you would request a committee to look into this issue by the city council.
Sure, there's a couple of processes for that. One would be the mayor's puts on the agenda, or it's a referral process through the council to go to committee. So we certainly can consider that. Can't do anything now because it's public comment portion, but through the next meetings it can certainly be possible based on which route you go.
Okay.
That make sense?
Only kind of.
Yeah, we can't make any formal, the council can't make any formal decisions because there's no one knows what public comment's going to be. So that request is now in our minds, and there's a two-way process to get that done. One way is to be on the agenda, to go to committee, or secondly, that council request it at the next meeting, so it could be the next following meeting to be on the committee.
Okay, well, I would love it if you would have time to visit with me and look at the issues and go to that next step.
You bet.
And really, and I'm also concerned about the kitty bashing that went on earlier with the cat litter, and we have lots of geese if anyone would like to have some of our geese instead of chickens and ducks.
Thank you, Tammy.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question for that, for staff. Is there any concern now that the rezoning has been approved for us interacting directly with the speaker on this?
Can I just maybe go over the process a little bit more? So the rezoning actually hasn't been approved. There's 3 readings of the rezoning, so there's 2 more readings that will happen. And what will happen is on the 3rd reading, that will not occur until the same night the plating catches up to the rezoning. So that'll all be approved in the same evening. So the rezoning, the plating, all usually takes place during that same evening.
Okay, so you still have to follow ex parte guidance?
That's correct.
Up until then, all right.
Mr. Butler, go ahead.
If I may, am I understanding that correct, that the zoning will hit the 3rd reading the same night the plat comes forward?
That's typically how we design that. So even sometimes the plat won't catch up, and we'll delay the 3rd reading of the zoning ordinance, so it always happens at the same night. That way it gives you the opportunity to see exactly which plat is going with the zoning.
But it also limits the ability of us to communicate with our constituents too, doesn't it?
Well, ex parte would also apply towards the plating, not just the zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Butler.
Thank you. I'm Mike Butler, 1022 Washington Street, just down the way a bit here. First, I want to put on my Rotary hat and thank you all, particularly staff, for the Clay Street Park. Rotary, the Cedar Falls Rotary Club and the Cedar Valley Club came up with some money. Staff did a heck of a job, and we have a really nice looking park that we just need a little more playground equipment. So if there's some laying around somewhere, that would be good. And I also want to thank you for letting us move forward with the Gold Star Monument. Blue Star families, just to give you background, are those who send their children off in harm's way. A red border around a field of white with a blue star in the center represents those Blue Star families. A Gold Star family, and we have many, and one that actually had 5, are those who know their children, their brothers and their sisters, their cousins, will not be coming home from defending us actually at war. The red border surrounds a field of white with the Gold Star in the middle. This tells us that a family has lost a child, brother, or sister. So there are 2,601 Gold Star families just from the Iraq War. So you can imagine the numbers. And I've seen several of these in at least 2 in Iowa, and the list of families. So that's what this is about. Not so much those of us that sometimes got to go off and be involved, but those who stayed behind and didn't have their families come home. So we really appreciate this. We don't quite have it all figured out yet, but we will raise the money and we will get it in place. So thank you very much.
Yes, I would like to thank you for your service to this country, because I know what you did in the service, and you deserve a lot of thanks from the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. I saw a hand on this side for public comment. Yes, sir. I saw you as well. Come on up. Yeah, thanks.
My name is Darren Yoder, 4204 Berry Hill Road. We also had the fire at 3919 Beaver Ridge Trail on February 5th. That was a total loss. And this is my first time speaking publicly since our fire. And I guess I first want to start by saying I have nothing but the highest level of respect for the individuals who are police officers, who are firefighters. Anyone willing to risk their lives for the city's safety deserves everyone's respect and appreciation. I'm here because of my fears and concerns for our city's safety after 4 experienced professional firefighters recently announced their resignation. In fact, I was just made aware that a 5th firefighter has officially turned in his resignation today. Jason Campbell, who was just awarded Firefighter of the Year for 2018, will no longer be part of the department which he called his second family. The obvious question is why are these good men leaving their second family? But my first question, I guess, to the city is if the city has been made or has been given any information that there's a possibility that our Cedar Falls ISO rating may be getting worse.
I'll note your questions and address them when you're done. Thank you, Mr. Yoder.
So I've been told the city won't hire professional firefighters. Instead, we are hiring people off the street to be police officers, also called public safety officers or PSOs once they've reached a minimal level of fire training. And that's our city's plan. Hire 4 PSOs off the street and put them on the police force with no experience. Then pull some PSOs from the police force and put them in the fire station with minimal fire experience. The result, number 1, we now have less experience on the police force and less experience in the fire station. Second, we now have to train 4 new PSOs to be police officers and train the PSOs in the fire station to be firefighters. Instead, we could have hired outside firefighters with experience to come in to replace the ones that resigned. We could build our fire department to be great, but that's not the plan. And I've done the math, replacing 4 firemen with 4 police and give the police a promotion does not save the city any money. And replacing experienced firemen with rookie PSOs does not make us safer. This experiment equals no savings, but putting the safety of the city at risk. It appears the City Council is giving Mr. Olson a free pass to experiment with the city's safety with no accountability. If we're going to proceed with this experiment, we should demand proof that this is working in our city. Not just the occasional stories of the successes, but the full story, including the failures. The public should hear the full story, not the stories Mr. Olson tells the paper that at our fire we had 40 firemen on scene. The full story is that only 6 firefighters showed up in the first response. The most critical time to be able to put out a fire. Two public safety officers arrived but didn't much contribute. In fact, there is a video. I assume not everyone in this room knows about the video of our fire from a fireman's helmet camera. Well, I've seen it and heard it. I watched it with Mr. Olson and Mr. Bostwick, and I assume they haven't informed the council to what was said. But 3 times it can be heard 3 times from the firefighter to the chief, 3 times. Where are the PSOs? Where the hell are the PSOs? The fire chief's response 3 times was simply, I don't know. I'd suggest everyone in this room, everyone in the city, would watch and listen for themselves. And maybe we can all see how this experiment is failing our city.
Thank you, Mr. Yoder. Anyone further for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Andrea Southall. I live at 9020 Beaver Meadows Lane in the Beaver Hills subdivision, as does Mr. Yoder. I have some things along the same lines that I wanted to speak to. As far as some quotes from the safety director and the fire chief in the media, it was quoted that staffing wasn't an issue, it was a water supply issue out in our subdivision, which I'm pretty sure Mr. Yoder has already addressed the staffing issue. But fast forward to now, the Beaver Hills community has done research, we have brought in experts, and we have self-funded the installation of a rural fire hydrant in our neighborhood. It is not placed yet, it is in the works to be placed. We have 71 homes in our subdivision. Almost 100% of those people contributed to this because they are so concerned about the safety in our area. We reached out to the public safety director and fire chief during this process to get them involved and to get their opinion. The fire chief told us it was a waste of our money to put that into our subdivision. And he didn't come to the meeting as he was invited to discuss this topic, because we held a meeting on September 9th to which he was invited because all of our subdivisions got together to discuss having this put in. So through no help or involvement of the city, the community is having the hydrant installed. We are trying to be proactive in providing ourselves with better fire protection services at our own expense. We realize that this is a rural water supply in our area. The association that's putting this in is willing to train the Janesville Fire Department, the volunteers there, and the firefighters from Cedar Falls on the best way to use this hydrant in our area if there were to be another fire. If it was truly a water supply issue, then why would the leaders of the public safety services tell the community, our community, that adding more water to our area was a waste of money?
Thank you very much. Anyone further for public comment this evening? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close off the public comment portion of the agenda. Director Olson, some questions there, some concerns, obviously, with some folks going through some things there in Beaver Hills, but anything addressed to what the previous speakers mentioned?
Yeah, certainly. So I believe it was last winter we had a fire out there, which there was a total loss to Derek's home. The fire was in the attic, and there's all sorts of issues with the fire out there. One is when you have a fire in an attic, it's very difficult to combat because you can't go up through the ceiling because the fire is going to fall on you. If you go on top of the roof, you may fall into the roof. So we immediately realized, we got a problem there. In fact, there was 2 individuals that went inside the home. One of them was PSO Craig Birdie, who's sitting in the back of the room here, along with firefighter Eric Jensen. They went inside and they took a panel off of the ceiling, and as soon as they saw what was in there, firefighter Jensen said, let's get out of here. So they got out of here. Water is a problem out there. We had to haul water into that fire, and we weren't able to. The complication with that is if you spray water its maximum capacity with just one pumper, you'll run out of water. So you have to conserve your water. We had somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 tankers. The city of Cedar Falls has 1 tanker, so we called in, I think it was 3 or 4 other agencies to help us haul water in. Janesville was one of them, I believe Dyke was one. I don't remember who they all were, it's quite some time ago. But we hauled 35,000 gallons of water into that fire. And unfortunately, we were only able to use 1 tanker at a time, because as you're hauling water in, and that roadway, we were able to back up 1 tanker, dump water, and then that tanker had to leave that road before we were able to back the next tanker in. So getting water there wasn't as quick as we would like it to have been. And I know we had numerous conversations and emails going back and forth between the neighborhood and even with Cedar Falls Utilities about providing water out there. They don't provide water to that location, it's rural water. It's my understanding, and I don't know this for certain, but the last conversations we had with rural water and CFU and some of the neighbors who are out there was they were going to pay to have a 6-inch water line in there. You hook up a pumper or two to a 6-inch water line and you'll collapse it. So it will provide you some water, but not as much water as we need to fight a fire like that. We're still going to be hauling water in. So that, although it could be helpful, water is still a challenge in a rural area. And I don't know what we can do about that other than for them to have a water tower and much bigger lines out there. I'd also like to address the concern about the firefighters leaving. You know, I've stated it before publicly. You know, we're going through some organizational change. And whenever you go through organizational change, whether it's a public or private business, you have individuals that don't like the change, can't deal with the change, and they leave. We've reached out to the union president, Scott Dix, and the vice president, Jeff Danielson, and we've asked to meet and discuss. They have refused to meet with us. And this conversation occurred approximately 1 month ago with them. They refused to meet and talk about any issues. You made a reference to we won't hire professional firefighters. Our PSOs are professional firefighters. I can tell you one of the PSOs that we have, who currently is a PSO who drives a squad car with his fire gear in the car, he was a firefighter for 2 years in a full-time fire department before he came here. He came to Cedar Falls because he saw the opportunity. He had an interest in both police and fire, and he saw the opportunity to be a police officer and a firefighter for the same city. He will be we're considering transferring him to the fire department to fill these roles that were being filled, as well as other PSOs who are certified firefighter ones, are trained by the firefighters in our fire department. The fire department, we've heard the rumors, we've heard the Facebook complaints, so they're not trained, they're not trained. Well, it's our Cedar Falls firefighters that train them. We have a 44-page manual that our firefighters use, and that PSO does not act until he's gone through all 44 pages and it's checked off by our firefighters. Also, he made a comment that this is an experiment. This is not an experiment. Cedar Falls is not experimenting. There is no accountability for me. Yes, there is accountability for me. Be careful when I say our model, but we went to Kalamazoo, Michigan. They've been a public safety department since the 1980s. They're a larger community than us, and they are 100% public safety officer at this point. They have made some significant improvements in their city as far as improving their fire and police service. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that this public safety department also adds police officers to the street without adding staff. So we have more police officers on the street and we have more firefighters responding. And I can give you a great example. 2 weeks ago we had a call at UNI. We had 19, between the police officers and firefighters, we had 19 working that could immediately respond to the scene. They were working at the time. That's not always the case. You know, sometimes it's 7, 8, or 9. But in the 30 years, our fire chief has been here for more than 30 years. He has seen the highest minimum staff level has been 7 in the last 30 years. We have seen, and about 2 or 3 years ago, we were at a fire scene, and it turned out we didn't have to do any extinguishing work, but he turned around and said to me, and this is after we started the PSO program, wow, I got 14 people here. He goes, I've been here 30 years, and we've never had that many at a scene at a time. So we're moving ahead significantly. We're not hiring 1 PSO per firefighter. In the past, the most this fire department had in the fire department is in about the mid-30s for firefighters. We have low 20-some full-time firefighters now. We've got 20 PSOs now. We've got 18 in training. We're going to have somewhere near 60 firefighters available. Not all available all the time, but some for callbacks and some are on duty. So we have, as we increase our numbers through the training program, the 18 more, the police shifts will have significant number of PSOs, and the fire shift will have a certain number of firefighters. So our minimum staffing level will be higher than it's ever been in the history of this fire department. This is not an experiment. You know, quite frankly, I get a little irritated sometimes of all the negativity and the people that come up and don't know how the program operates, and it's getting frustrated. We have, I'll be quite frank with you, we have some firefighters that should leave, and we have some that are leaving. In fact, one is leaving, not necessarily maybe by his choice. And so we've got some issues here that we're dealing with internally. Again, we've reached out to the fire union. We want the fire union to meet with us. We'd like to resolve these issues. If we had a bad incident, believe me, it would be all over the papers and all over the media. We have not had bad incidences. We've had fires and we've had houses burned down, as we've had for the last 30 years, as had Waterloo, as had Des Moines and Dubuque and Cedar Rapids and any other fire department in town. They have had situations where house burns down. Many cities have had fatalities. It's a tragedy. These things occur whether you have 100 fire departments or 100 people in your fire department or you have 30. You know, I could go on and on and on about how this works and about all the different departments and do it, but in closing, I'd like to say, in the cities we have talked to that have gone through this, they've told us this is exactly what you're going to see, is you're going to have resistance and you're going to have a lot of it. That's why a lot of cities choose not to to do this because of the resistance. But they said you're going to have a lot of resistance and you just need to stick through it, because when it's done, you'll have a much better police department and a much better fire department than you've ever had. And I believe we will.
Thank you, Director Olson. Folks, we're now adjourned to executive session. Thank you.